the meanest?
Sure enough.
Am I the prettiest?
Sure enough.
Am I the baddest mofo low down around this town?
Sure enough.
Well, who am I?
Sure enough.
Who am I?
Sure enough.
I can't hear you.
Sure enough.
Hey, folks, how are you? Happy Wednesday, folks. Ancestrylands, you're live with Uncle Phil. How are you, folks? How are you, folks?
You're now listening to
Hey, folks, how are you? Folks, you're now live with Uncle Phil, Ancestrylands, ancestrylands.com. I got a good nap in today, folks. Quick nap. My age, sometimes a nap can be very recharging. I had to tell my wife earlier, you tend to run tired, man. When you have kids, your schedule, your life is not your own. You tend to, have to wake up in the morning, get the kids ready for school, make sure the breakfast is made, rush to get everybody out of the house, and then, work out, come home, the baby needs, to eat our sons are now eating baby food. And the day just rushes through. Then the kids come home, then you got to do dinner and close up. And when you at this point you start not to have your own schedule, you start to live off the schedule of your kids. So a lot of parents they do and understand, they do know that. And then in the nighttime, I'm working, not only the podcast, the land business itself. It can be quite taxing, mental and physically, even emotionally and spiritually. So sometimes, a quick 40-minute nap recharges your body, and today, folks, episode 22, Ancestry Lands. I'm going to take a little detour today. First of all, I want to issue a little bit of a correction. Yesterday, news sources from the Nashville incident that's going on with the Covenant School, I had said yesterday that the female person that was, doing the attack on the school and the children was reported at first a teenager, but obviously the person's now in their mid-20s. So I just wanted to say that, that correction on that. It was not a teen. It was actually a supposed woman in her 20s or something like that. And there's more information going out. I'm going to stay on the prayers go out to the family, loved ones of the lives that are lost in the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee. Our main story and our only story today, I'm going to stay talking on this, is the interracial dating, the diaspora of interracial dating. Interracial dating in itself, it's kind of a misnomer, because when you look at African Americans as a whole, they are African Americans just as purely born in African America, and I'm sorry, African Americans born in America. In Africa, there are tribes. There is the country you're from, but then there is the tribe, the subset of where you're from. Let's say in Kenya or any of the other countries, they have, subgroups that they belong to. In America, African Americans are typically anyone who would not be considered white, Latino, or any other ethnicity, like Asian, Asian as a whole group. But the only time when people are using Asians, when they're put as a collective group, and African Americans, that's all there is. It's just a collectivism. Everyone's African American, just because they're simply black. That's it. There's no delineation. There's no, now you have, they've made the line markers according to whether you were born in this country, if you're ADOS or, FBA, things like that. And if you're not familiar where this is stemming from a little bit, is that, on YouTube, the environment of YouTube is much different than the outside real world environment. And, they have the men's space is been dominated by the previous years have been dominated by the late Kevin Samuels. If you know who Kevin Samuels is, he was very image consultant, and he rose up into the ranks and actually made it into the mainstream talking about men issues, particularly black men and black women issues. He centered his message on black women and black men's issue. And for a long time until his untimely death, that was led black men and black women's issues, even in the realm of interracial dating, was led by a man of color. After his, departure from this world plane, the void was filled with, I guess you would say, Andrew Tate at that point, who's half black. That message kind of went away from, getting back to the center of relationships, the dysfunction within it, the brokenness of the black household. And I'm just going to give my take on it. As a listener, as a viewer, when I heard Kevin Samuels, there was an eye opening to understanding why my parents even got divorced, why growing up in the late, throughout the 80s into the 90s, seeing the actual breakdown of the black family from, coming from a black, both my parents are African Americans or black, if you will, and seeing that breakdown along the way, and then the devastation of the divorce and how that just brought a calamity on my family. And I've seen my father, who was a black single father, raising us at a time. I know that's strange, but a black single father striving to put us in a better environment. I've talked about this in other videos. And at that time, people may not know, outside of the Philadelphia area, a lot of the city people were moving into the suburbs. I've talked about this before. And again, like I've said, is that, now in the YouTube space, after Andrew Tate, who's been locked up now, you had, this Caucasian woman from, in UK. I've heard about her. I've never really watched any of her material. And she became very galvanized and pushed up into the forefront of what would be the man space, was being led by a woman. And as a person who is looking for forward guidance from the male community, seeing a woman at the top of that um leading the male space, it has you kind of wondering, because there's no men leading men, there's a woman leading men. And then you see how, because of that popularity, who doesn't like a person that's popular? um And I think, again, that the black male and male males, the black and white space of the male space, that was somewhat separated, if you will, because, of course, everybody feels like they need their own. The world is showing us that there's a problem within male space on a whole. The male makeup, there's a problem with it on a whole when it's being led by a woman at the top, dictating the culture, the talking points. And there's no disrespect to the woman at all. Um, but again, there's no men leading men. It's nice to have cheerleaders or people that are supporting the narrative, but again, there's a person at the top. And even in black male spaces, you can see how a large part of the black community, went to bat, or followed behind the white woman leading the male space. Now, there's no direct benefit for the black community themselves. It's not, this person has created landowners. They've created, black. There's been the argument, at least from what I've seen, is that there's an employment. There's this person's employed tons of black content creators. That's there's nothing that should be taken away from that. The fact of opportunities being given, but when that becomes a signal or a symbol of a person, of the defense for a person, and again, like I said, when black people do it, if you're married to a white woman, such as I am, you get the little bit more of the harsher treatment than the white person who's employing blacks, if you will, giving opportunities from blacks. And me, as a landowner, creating land ownership opportunities, new landowners. I've said this before, your blackness can be scratched off by any other black person. If you look at your ethnic breakdown of being African American, you might see that your percentages of, Nigerian or, whatever the, Congo or whatever the different countries that exist within Africa, because there are many. The black community as itself, as a whole, even when I've seen my wife come in, I've seen the overwhelming welcoming of, my wife. And again, the misconception about interracial relationships is that a lot of times black men are marrying or being with white women because we just have this fascination with whiteness. That's not the case for me. My wife being a white woman, or a white woman in particular, a lot of the attraction was to the common interest. When you are dealing with the black community as a whole, there is a very limited amount of culturing outside of, integrating with the world. And you can see that a lot, where blacks always feel like they need their own space, but their space is not inclusive of the experiences that the world does bring in. It's not the same way when you have casual conversations like with land ownership with, you know, in black community, it's the idea of generational wealth, but that's not necessarily tied to land ownership. Where if you talk to sometimes the the white counterparts, they understand the value in land ownership intrinsically because that's taught within the household growing up. Certain things are, more community wide in other communities. And it's not just whites, this could be in Indian cultures, Chinese cultures, Asian cultures at large, even in Hispanic cultures, even a lot of people who come from Hispanic cultures understand the value in land and obtaining and owning land. Here, we have not gotten our 40 acres and a mule, and that's the thing. We tend to go back over on we decry, we want representation, we want inclusion, but we're not into obtaining the things that we can actually get. We want it kind of given in a way. We're not getting after it, if you will. The problem with just kicking all the people who are interracially dating, have interracial kids, is that our leadership, Kamala Harris, this person who's not African American by real standards. I believe she's, native Indian from India and Caribbean descent. When you have people who are not African Americans deciding that they are African Americans to jump into the identity politics, then it kind of decreases the available pool of actual people who are African Americans. Yeah, you've seen with Busta Rhymes, now he's flown back onto the Caribbean side and he no longer is, everyone can abandon the African American community. But even people I find who are interracially dating, we still stay within the African American community. We don't excommunicado our blackness. We don't. We stay right there. But we're kicked out oftentimes by people who decide that because we're in a relationship with a person from a different race. And again, I wouldn't know what the distinguishment is between someone who's dating a Latina, married to a Latina, married to anyone who's not black. Why would it be, if you're dating a Mexican woman or married to a Mexican woman, why would it not be any different than dating or married to a white woman? Why would it be any different? Why would it be any different if you're married to, an African? Because it's not actually an African American, is a different, even African, you would, a Kenyan marrying a Somalian. I'm pretty sure in certain cultures that's not allowed to, within the subgroups, like I've said before. So it puts you in a quagmire. And once again, I see with our community is that the dysfunction, the way that the lines are not clear, you can always see that the black community on a whole is there's no strength in it. I can see how during slavery this may not have gone well because again, you have people that are from different tribes. There are people who give in control. There are people who become gatekeepers. There are people who become the overseers of pretty much the main part of the community. You can see that now in the YouTube space, especially in the Black YouTube space. The defense of the person at the head of the male space, the defense of it when they say things that go counterculture to, I guess you would say there's potentially racial things that are said. You see them happen with some of our democratic progressive leaders. And what I see is that a lot of times there's too much attacking our own. One of the things I looked at this situation for the people who are in the know of what's going on in the YouTube verse, the universe of YouTube. When Kanye said his statements, his own people turned on him, despite it being truth. And what I see in this space is people picking a side over someone that is not of African American descent, talking about blacks in America and slavery and their opinion of us over dramatizing the slavery experience, which realistically that person has no place talking about that. But there's been defenses of, well, the numbers, the stats, other places say this, and we're picking all of our talking points to bring up a defense of this person who sat on the platform with another person not of color, a person that's white, Caucasian, and they spoke on slavery from an authority where they never descended from slaves. They didn't have family, they have no lineage or affiliation with that. And then you have the rush for people to defend that and other people to climb up there because the person's, they're very high up in the YouTube world. There's a lot to gain from aligning yourself with someone who's successful. I get it. And everything would have been fine before this was all said, and then there were other comments that came out. And my whole thing is when Kanye, when he said what he said about the people in control, he lost billions because that community stayed on code. It didn't matter if they were the lowest or the highest within that community. The Judean, that community, they stay on code with their group. Despite the fact that you could see that all the executives, the members, what he was saying is actually has some truth to it now. We could see that, but that black man was crazy because he's with Kim and, it's Kanye. But what I saw was that a whole group community, they came down on him. That's what they say about staying on code. And when you're in an interracial relationship, what you'll find a lot of times is that people who necessarily may date out of their race, or when we're clearly aware that the person we're with is not our race. The problem is that when you're dating another person from another race, you become more aware of what you are because the differences are right there up in front of you. You see a person has different cultural practices, they season their food differently. You have disagreements over things that a person may not be aware of because they come from a different aspect in society. I've had this happen with my wife, with her family, where sometimes they're not aware of the impact of things that they say. And I think for blacks, they feel like that we don't check that at the door. My wife has said some things that she's talked on the black community. And the first thing I've asked her is that, what authority do you have to speak on black issues? You don't have any. You're not black. Said that to my wife many a times, just shut her down on the speaking from a white perspective on black issues. And where I feel the black community gets things wrong is that we are safeguarders for that mix, that gray area where blacks and whites or other cultures may intermingle. Because if you had a Latina saying the same thing, would it be okay? That's what I'm always wondering is when you date a Spanish girl and she says something that calls you the N word, do blacks check that? Because the white woman knows not to say that because that's a problem. You've seen Jonathan Majors. Yeah, he's given, whatever. He's having issues in the car with a woman and that becomes national news. But again, what I saw with Kanye was when Kanye said what he said, the whole world came down on him. When this woman in the YouTube space said what she said, which is clearly a bad comment about slavery and as such, she's got black defenders and she's got people who are against her on both sides. But Kanye got the brunt of the whole world to the point where it cost him financially. A lot of blacks just say, Kanye's crazy. We don't stay with our own, whether they're good or bad. Other races do stay loyal. They'll still ride with their own group. They handle things internally. Let a black person comment on being authority on leading the Italian issues. You're never going to see that happen. You won't see that in any other culture where blacks are allowed to come in and take over space designed for other groups. We don't do that. We can't do that. You've seen that even with former President Barack Obama. There was a great resistance for him to be leading a country that is predominantly being led by Caucasian males or females, whatever you want to call it. Even running against former, Hillary Clinton. Still, there was a defiance to his blackness. When you're dating someone interracial outside of the girl you're dating, you've got to meet her family. A lot of times people are very welcoming. They're very open to you dating. I've dated Filipino girls in my high school years, and their families were darker than myself, and they had problems with me just being black. That's a Filipino. Now I go to hospitals all the time, and people think I'm Filipino. I don't know. Or Mexican, doesn't matter, because I have fair skin. Despite having two black parents, my mom's dark skin, my dad is around my complexion. My brother's darker skin than I am. So I can be racially ambiguous depending on who's looking at me. It happens a lot. So even if I've dated particularly Filipino women, there's an issue in that because I'm not of their race. There's been issues with that along the way. It's not just in a white space. If you look at Indian to Eastern Indians, again, they tend to stay race loyal. Even in that environment, there are delineations and we look at them as all the same, but they actually have subgroups within there, Northern and Southern India. What group like Mulish? There are different groups in there that don't mix with other groups, even in India. We look at them as a whole. We tend to speak as we understand that other groups just marry as a whole within their race, but they have subgroups that they don't mix with other groups within their race. Not the same with blacks. Once you get past the family members, you might meet the mother, who moms tend to be very cool. Dads tend to be, they can be a little on the fence. Grandparents can be a little bit more of a challenge, brothers and sisters, because there's a presentation of a black man. We tend to be a little bit more aggressive. At least for me, I tend to be a little bit more aggressive. But one thing we don't lose is our identity as being black. Black men understand we are black no matter what. We're black in the eyes. When you're in a space, and that's the problem I have. I've seen a lot of times in black spaces, they get uncomfortable with being in white spaces. They need their own space. For the blacks that hang out there, we're always reminded that we're not black. What you have is blacks going back and saying, oh, he thinks he's white. No, that's not the case. We're very aware that we're black because we always get to a point where we see that there's a ledge there. There's a door you can't go into. You get seen that when you're not the predominantly black in the room. It takes a great deal of strength to not be everyone is the same in a room and you can just be comfortable. You have to learn to be comfortable in a place where you're one of many. It's not something that's easily done, and you don't trade blackness. That's not a currency whites trade in. Because at the end of the day, they still see you as black. They do. It doesn't matter what you do. Your skin is always a reminder to them that you are black, no matter how Barack Obama, just look at that case study with him. It's still he was black. It didn't matter how educated he was. He smoked Newports. He still was black, even if he was the president of the United States. It did not matter. You could still say, hey, yeah, he married a black woman, but his presentation wasn't, he didn't speak in slang. He didn't speak, he spoke as an educated person. In the South, they might call that speaking white. He spoke in that vernacular, that edict. That's the way he spoke. When you make it past dating or you're in an actual relationship, you're going to realize that, dealing with a white woman, like I've told my father many a times, is that, yeah, their skin color's different. Yeah, they might be Catholic where you're Baptist, still worship Jesus. They may do things a little different. They may not eat meat on Fridays. They may not wear weaves. You might be able to pull their hair. They might go swimming, all these little different variations. But at the end of the day, you're still dealing with a woman. Still. Once you make it to a marriage, having children, you still are dealing with a person that now you have children that are mixed. Your kids are going to grow up like my children are, going out to the world where sometimes kids are not aware of when they're saying that, hey, you're black to each other. The kids may appear a little darker, a little bit lighter. My kids are a little bit on the lighter side because I'm lighter. And, my wife, and again, most of my black family thought my wife was Mexican or something, like a white Mexican, if you will. Even in that culture, white Hispanics are a thing. Egyptians are allowed to put white when they're coming to America. They're allowed to identify as whites. Did you know that in Africa, Egypt, which is in Africa, they don't necessarily identify themselves as African? I've actually had this conversation a long time ago when I was a personal care nurse for a child, and their home was hired by their parents in New York City, and they had a physical therapist for their daughter. He was Egyptian, and I remember talking to him, and I said, "Hey, you're African." He says, "No, I'm Egyptian." Looked at him and said, "And Egypt is in Africa, right?" He said, "Yeah." And he had finally conceded to being African. And that was when I already had that knowledge before then that Egyptians were like that. And he would not identify himself as an African, as a black African, even though Egyptians or Egypt is in Africa. It's a crazy thing for me. So even there at the source, there still is a problem identifying with being black. And that's in the mother country, if you will, mother continent. Not even mother country, but mother continent. When you're dating, marrying, I found a lot of times that when I was with white women, their appreciation for art, sciences, things like that. There were things beyond my experiences with black women that they were not interested in that I had a natural interest in. History. And there are white women who are not interested in it at all. Trust me, there are. But when you're growing up, there's a limitation in that environment because where I grew up, a lot of black girls were not interested in going to a museum. They were hanging out with the thug, whatever was black prominent culture at that time, destructive black prominent culture at that time was what everybody wanted to identify and be along with. Squares, nerds running the world now was not the thing when I was growing up. That was not in favorable fashion. Now that I have children, it's a little bit different story. But again, I constantly have to remind them that they are black because when you get pulled over, the girl that's in the blonde hair, the police will not see you as even though your mom's white. I tell them all the time. I tell my wife that Barack Obama is always a reminder of us that a white mom does not make you necessarily white in the eyes of the world. I believe many black fathers tell their mixed children that personally, and I'm sure I would encourage them to do that with their children in front of their wife. The day that you think the day that your child meets a police officer is when you're going to be reminded of the either effectiveness or the lack thereof of the teachings when you're telling your mixed children that they are black. You should remind them that they will not always be seen or given the luxuries of their white counterparts, their friends. If they're raised around white friends, they may see their mother and identify themselves because children aren't really a rare race, which is a social construct. They're not aware of it. And you have to, as a black father, remind your children that the world will see them black first. There is a difference when I see my wife with my children interacting in certain areas than when I have my children and I'm interacting in certain areas. There's a hesitancy when I'm around. And again, that is only limited to the point of the social interaction that the children are in at the time with their peers. You can see it. You do your kids a disservice when you do not educate them on being black. You don't have to instill in them the terrors or the fear that's been put into us by our parents about being black in America because times are changing. They are. For better or for worse, we could argue that. But again, for the most part, you have to understand is that people consider just being in an interracial relationship or liking white women in that. A lot of times you're dealing with liking a person, not a color. If the black community is having such problems with marriages and single fathers, single mothers rates, I would say, how dare you judge interracial people when you're not showing stats that are doing better? My one black ass is not going to change the numbers, the stats as they are. If anything, I feel I would probably contribute to continuing stats because again, the love for the things that I've had, I found that black women did not share those passions. And you would say, maybe I haven't met the right one. I've been traveling from here to California all the way to Oregon. And that has always remained true no matter what place I'm in. Because economically, our blacks or African Americans are not economically in an upward mobility cycle. If you've seen the stats, I've talked about this, I've got videos on this, that by 2053, black wealth will be at near zero. It doesn't matter how much I talk about land ownership. It doesn't matter how much I talk about no interest rate and no interest charges, no credit checks. I do not have a problem with inventory being available. I am never sold out when I go to black community events to talk about land ownership. I'm always overcheered, given loud applauses, but there's not a line going outside the door for people to sign up for land ownership. It's not. Now, have a Jordan sale, Jordan sneakers, Kobe sevens that I have in there for $500. I have a line outside the door. Any one of the classic Jordan sneakers, if I had a store selling nothing but retro Jordans, I'd have a line outside the store with not a limit on purchasing items. Line outside the store. Tell people you're going to be selling land ownership. Might have one person come in throughout the day. Our priorities are messed up. Our priorities are extremely messed up, where they're already projecting, hey, not only are we going to be a permanent minority or underclass, we're not even going to have any wealth contributed to it. I've said this before, and I'm going to speak on it again. We won't even be a considerable voting block, as now Hispanics or Latinas have passed us and now being a larger populace than us. So again, why should I stay in there? I went outside my race to build myself my own economic upward mobility, and I've come back to my own community to say, "Hey, I'm a gatekeeper. I'm actually not a gatekeeper. I'm an actual keymaster. I open doors for others Gatekeepers are designed to screen who comes past. I'm a keymaster. I'm opening doors for people to own land that I own, not as a realtor selling someone else's property. I'm passing ownership straight through. A realtor is getting a commission. What they're doing is taking what someone else owns and selling it to another person for the idea of making a largeable profit off the sale, a middleman. I'm an actual owner selling ownership to a new owner. My money is invested in where my mouth is. And what I'm doing is passing that ownership on for another person to utilize as a vehicle for themselves to enrich themselves in the same way I have. But therein lies the problem, because what people do is they start going down a checklist. Is he married to a black woman? Nope. Up, already down. Not black enough now. If I was married to a black woman, it would be how I speak. That's always been something that's been lobbed against me before I was even married to a black woman, even when I've dated black women or anything else. And again, it's a shifting narrative over what's acceptable to be black in this country. If you got your pants sagging, you got chain jewelries, gold teeth, bad debt, bad credit, divorce, locked up, you can be black. No one questions you being black if you have all of those negative traits. Get educated, be wealthy. Now you start to get minuses. You start to get deducted. That's the only culture that as you climb up the economic ladder, you start to become less black. There's no value in being black if black is always defined at what is the worst. And then you get the narrative about us being kings and queens and all of this stuff. But again, kings and queens are royalty. They are at the pinnacle of whatever society it is. And it ain't ghetto culture. It's not. When you're interracially dating, you are no longer limited to your own culture. You have superseded the limitations of your own culture. You now are valuable for whatever reasons that you qualify, where other cultures find you a value to bear children from you. I've never had an overwhelming amount of black women who were, just it was always a guy with light eyes. He could hoop, he could basketball. Those were always the counter one. I mean, there's got to be people out there who's I mean, Michael B. Jordan was part of that. And again, it's always something about the cool people who were the thugs or whatever at that time, looking at us corny guys, educated guys. That's what's corny in a black society. Is when you go to school, get good grades. When you operate within society, you're corny. L7, because you're not hip, you're not cool, you're not black then. It's hard for me to be that way when my father demanded excellence from me, when he wanted me to go to college and get a college degree. A lot of the friends that I grew up with, they didn't graduate or go to college. In my neighborhood, many of them didn't. I saw many of the parents that were well off sent their kids to Catholic school. They dated white girls, and the parents could be black and didn't have a problem with it. They saw the openness of the world. They saw their children expanding into different groups, growing. And the gatekeepers really of the black community are not even black themselves. They're actually white people on the super, I like Jurassic Park. Just take that example. The people working the fencing, the areas where all the dinosaurs are, those can be black people where the boundaries are. But the people running Jurassic Park are white people. That's what the black community is. Jurassic Park. We think that, the black people in there in charge of opening and closing the gate, making sure the wire and public's on, we think those are the people that are in charge. But really, the people who run the park and the security desks and deploy all the military assets, those are the people making sure that the people who supervise our success or community areas, those black leaders, so to speak, that make sure they control what black is and what black isn't. Those are not the people that actually run the actual black community. Black community is not even run by blacks. I guarantee it. It can't be. That's it. The blacks are the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. The people who are running the edge of the borders are supposedly the people who are going to speak always and get the dominant. They have the dominant say in what is black or what isn't black. And usually the people around, if you ever look at the movies, whoever's running the Jurassic, the actual containment areas for where every dinosaur is, they're never competent. If you think about it, that's what Jurassic Park is built on incompetence, at every standpoint, the people running the perimeters of the enclosures where the dinosaurs are, they're never super smart people. And then you have always the central group where everybody's on the computers and the cameras and the screens. That's where your white people are. And that's what we forget. We don't understand that. We got gatekeepers. What I am is a keymaster. I've had more people of color by land, blacks too, as well. I've actually had more people of color buy land from me than non-people of color. And that's only because of who people choose to buy from. I've tried to help our people get back into owning land, but I find it hard is how do they want to own land? They want to own land for nothing, for free. They want land to be where they want it to be, not an opportunity to take and seize as it opens, as it presents itself. I believe it was Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar that said that opportunities multiply to those who seize them. And now I see at the very top of even the male space, I mean, hell, men can't even have a space that's just for them. And it's right there run by a white woman. And I just want to know all the people that I listen to on YouTube that talk about black issues, that talk about blacks ain't this, or he's what do they call me? Not black enough, not white enough, or whatever else. And these spaces, you're being led by a white woman. What is it any different? The infighting. And you can see this is probably why slavery was able to be, kind of continuing on. And maybe it didn't need to be, whites being as cruel because they saw that we would be cruel to each other. I'm sure that there were slaves that were chose to mate with the masters and the masters' wives or whatever else that were ostracized because they were picked by the other group. They weren't accepted. No one saw that they were on the outskirts. No one saw or supported them because they didn't have a choice. And that's passed on today with people who are not desirables for being part of the suffering group, the degenerate group, the bottom of the bottom. If you don't have twist in your hair, if you don't speak unintelligibly, if you don't sag your pants down to your ankles where your underwears, calves, hamstrings are showing, if you're not invested in anything that is not of wealth building, generally, everything else that has nothing to do with building actual wealth, or if you didn't go to the best schools, or if you don't speak in an actual understandable or intelligible jargon, then you're not considered black. Of course not. How can you be considered black if you identify with everything that is not black, which is being ignorant as hell, non-educated, and you don't know the latest rap song? You don't smoke weed or Black and Milds. You don't do all the things that black people do. You can't be black. And some people get a pass. They're allowed to be educated. Like I said, it's a squirrely bunch. So people are allowed to date white women and be on pro-black shows. I don't know. Interracial dating. I've dated whites, blacks, Puerto Ricans, Asians. I've dated all different kind of races. Like I told my father once upon a time, I said, at the end of the day, I still got to go through dealing with a woman. It's no different. Your woman, my mom, can call you the N-word. My wife doesn't. My wife has her own way of being disagreeable with me to the point where I can't stand it. Anybody who's been with a woman, tell me if you've never found, and I've got people who are so concerned about the image of them dating a white woman, and I ask them, how have you been successful with black women? How successful have you been? Have you been okay? So you dated black women, you've married black women, and it didn't work. I've got cousins who've got numerous kids by black women. None of those relationships have worked. I'm sorry, if you've been married to 4 or 5 black women, or you've had multiple baby mamas with black women, maybe it's not working for you either. Maybe you're not black enough. I don't know. I picked my wife because, for one, even in our worst times, which we've been together 10 years, we both do not want to be divorced. We don't. Even though we've been at the gate many a time, because we're in a marriage. We're going through two different people being together regardless of race. One thing I learned about being around whites is that they just don't. One of the difference that people don't understand about whites is not that they're inherently racist. It's just that they don't have the same concerns that we do, which we find to be racial. One of the big differences I've seen. But again, at the end of the day, they still get divorced too. They still get taken for all their money too. They still like to be with their wives. They still have to go through the same things we go through. No one looks at an interracial relationship as, I've got a prize. We have a woman, and the first thing we're looking at is a woman who is accepting of who we are. A lot of people don't see that. A lot of people don't see that you're not picking someone based upon their skin color. Hell, you got black people that pick black women not because they're black, but because of their assets, their lips, their butt, their chest. When a person is picking another person, and they're half the times, you have to understand is that in an interracial relationship, a person is not necessarily picking you because of their color. They see past that. Your color 9 times out of 10 doesn't help you unless there's some kind of fantasy, but that's usually related for some adult websites. And again, your community, the people that they find ways to kick you out. They find ways to excommunicado you quickly out because you're in a interracial relationship. They've never sit down and talk to people who are in interracial relationships and ask them, what do you go through? My father's done the same thing with me, and I tell him, I was like, just because my wife is white, don't mean I don't have problems with her. Or you don't know what it's. I've dated black women, and I've gone through the same issues that I've gone through with white women. The problem, they don't listen to a damn thing I say. That's the first one. And I was just over the weekend sitting there with my son's baseball game, and I saw a white dad standing over there in the court. He didn't want to talk to his wife. He's standing over there. She's asking him questions unknowingly, and he's barely answering. I can identify when a man and a woman are fighting. It didn't matter what color they are. We're creating a utopia where there is none. When I see a black man with a black woman and he's going through problems with his woman not listening to him, talking over him, not letting him talk, or the fact that he's got to tell her 14 times something to do and she's not compliant with his leadership, I see the same things dealing with white women or black women. It's not happening in some places, it's happening all around. So to me, the racial issue is not an issue. It's now the issue of a man dealing with women. I've got black friends that they're attracted to white women. They're scared to death because they're worried about what the community thinks. And I tell them, black man, be happy. If you can find a woman who you can make a relationship work out with, what the hell does her color matter at the end of the day? It ain't like we don't have failing black relationships and the high numbers of percentages. So again, at this point, you've got to just find someone you can be happy with. That's my issue when people go and bring the charges to, interracial dating. He think he white. He think he this, or they think, that, or she just like N-words or whatever else. That maybe just maybe you missed the first part of people are trying to find someone they can be happy with. If putting two blacks together was just as simple as that, then the black community would be 79% of the population right now. It would be, we would have overwhelming population numbers. And it's not the case. And I've got to tell some of my black friends who have black parents, listen, man, how many black women have you dated? A lot. Okay, have many of them worked out just because y'all were black? Was that the key to making it work? Just the black marker? No, because after you get past skin color, you still have a relationship to deal with. You as a man, north, south, east, west, have certain wants and needs that you need satisfied or completed. You have things that you're good at, things that you're bad at. The black woman or woman, period, has certain wants, needs, and formulations that she's become now a woman with. She has things she's proficient at and things she's deficient at. And those things need to line up to have a successful relationship. Color is not going to just, you're not just bound here. It don't work that way. But all of a sudden, we think that, interracial means that it's automatically better. No, what we're trying to do is go outside of what's not working to find something else that does work. And you see that often. The most times that I see people telling me I'm not black enough, or people with more failed relationships than I can count with another person of the same color. And I'm asking them, well, if you got all the answers, black man, how come your shit didn't work out well? How come you don't have a successful marriage then? My marriage isn't being successful because I'm married to a white woman. It's hard as hell because I'm with a woman. Because I have to, half of the day, I have to make sure that we have a buy-in on an idea. When she presents something to me, I may not want to do it. You have to remember that you're dealing with a person from the opposite sex. They don't have the same motivations as you do. With the case of Jonathan Majors, if he's, at least from the situation, what I know is that he's got a phone and he's checking his phone. She's trying to look at the phone and see what's going on. She wants to check the phone. It ain't no different if that was a black woman, white woman. A woman's going to act the same way in the same situation if she gives a damn about the man she's with. My wife's checked my phone many a times asking who is this and who is that. I've had the same conversation with her that I've had with previous black, Italian, Spanish, Puerto Rican, Indian, and Native American women. Doesn't change. Is this based off of something that has happened recently? No. But what I see constantly is that people trying to move their positions on, when it's okay to be black, when it's okay to be good with whites. We vote for white leaders, but all of a sudden we got something to say with whites. We work for white bosses, but we got something to say against whites. We take leadership cues from whites, but then we got something to say when it comes to their, again, make up your damn mind. And again, how are we so successful that we can tell people who have said, you know what, bye-bye. I'm going to go out here and go somewhere else to try to find happiness. I don't see it here. Now, if you're telling me that our black community has 90% marriages, 90% children's, and if the numbers are there, then we shouldn't be leaving the planet. We shouldn't be leaving our nation where we're building up on that. But again, you've got people saying stay black, and then look at what the situation is. Now, again, am I saying black women are the problem? No, but it's something's wrong on both parts. And I'm saying again, even in male spaces, black or white, you have a white woman leading black men, telling black men issues about women, black women too, and they're taking cues from her. I've also told people at the same time, a white woman doesn't run my house. A black man does. I've had a neighbor come to me and say, I'm worried about what you and your kids. I say, all I'm doing is arguing the whiteness out of them. I've told my wife the same thing. The world has a problem with a black man being an authority figure, even in his own house. But her whiteness will not overrule me. Because I understand, again, when I came to my children skipping, they're half black children that are perceived as being black. If they were Asian, I wouldn't have that problem. Not saying the school was racist, but I've covered that in different videos. And I'm telling people out there, forget about what people think. Forget about it. Like I told my friend, a good college buddy of mine, man. It broke my heart to hear him say that, he goes into a bar with a white girl. The girl loves him to death. She loves him despite his flaws. Boy got diabetes, had more hospital visits because he can't take care of his damn feet. He can't even feel them, but don't even take care of his feet. So he's been in the hospital many a times because he's had issues related to diabetes. Smart as hell, but also not as bright when it comes to health maintenance. And I told him, I said, man, a guy was having a dirty look. He got it from a black man. I'm sorry, a white guy, excuse me. I've been in hospital places where I've seen my kids, I've seen other black children. Hey, how you doing? Mom looks at me, looks at my wife. She don't want to speak. I've acknowledged you and your children. Why the hell don't you want to speak to me as a black man? I've seen the same times me just being walking down as a black man. You don't know who the hell I'm married to. And a black woman won't speak. How you doing, sister? No, nothing. So what am I supposed to do? Today, you may not like a black man because you're tired of black men shit. And then now all of a sudden, me walking down the street, I don't get acknowledged. If my kids are playing with your kids, the second you see them with a white woman, all of a sudden now I'm not qualified. Again, I don't know which way to go. And if I'm black and I'm divorced and I'm a single father and I've got every downward situation or I sag my pants, I'm black enough in other black men's eyes. If I'm not a square or a nerdy guy, I'm cool in black men's eyes because I could fight or beat somebody up. That's the measure always. And it's not the measure anymore. That's what people relate to. The cool points. And again, for guys like me, I'm not trying to fight everybody. I don't care how cool or thuggish you are. I just want to be happy. I told my wife earlier, man, again, like every other marriage that goes out there, things dry up. Coitus is not happening every day. Fellatio is not happening all the time. Backdoors are not being entered into all the time. And I've seen other married men go through the same thing as I do. Again, people just trying to be happy. Happiness is meeting a person, not a color. Happiness is meeting a person that you can build a stressful life with. It's not a rosy road full of that. My wife could be with a white man and she would have different problems, but she would have problems with another man. It don't matter his color. You still have to get past everything that comes with the difficulties of existing in life. Seeing a man argue with this woman, you can relate no matter what color he is. I don't speak native Indian tongue, but I've seen a man in there argue with this woman. I don't understand the language, but I can understand the emotion, his frustration with her not listening, his frustration with her not following, his frustration with his children not doing the things that he wants to. It's all around because we're human beings. So I'm going to tell you all this. At some point, you got to stop giving a damn. At some point, you've got to decide that your happiness is worth more than the identity politics that are being played out there. Your happiness, you thriving in a marriage that you can be successful at. I've been married with my wife now going on almost 9 years. I've been married longer than my two black parents. I've been married longer than some of my childhood friends' parents. And again, all I'm trying to do is be happy. That's the only thing that matters to me. Someone who can love me. Children that will adore me for being a strong leading father. Not someone who doesn't want to submit or doesn't want to do the things when I'm qualified to lead. And it's shameful that you got to feel like people don't accept you because you now have to qualify in their eyes for whatever bullshit that they feel, makes you whatever skin color you represent. Being black is a social construct. Who cares if you marry a color when they are not a person that's going to treat you right? Who cares? This is what happens when I don't get a long enough nap, folks. But any which way, like I said, I'm going to close it out there. I'm not going to give any final closing thoughts. But again, you see what's going on. 2053. All the pro-blacks out there who love to talk about blackity black. 2053, no wealth. No wealth. They're saying you're not going to own anything. You're not going to have anything. You're worried about CBDC and everything else, interest rate. They already saying we're not going to own anything. What have I done? I've owned land. I've got a business model. I've got my daughter working in a business. I've tried to come on here and talk to people through land videos, everything else to show people, man, you got to own something. Hell, I've talked to people about Social Security. They won't listen. They won't listen until the people who make the decision force them to listen. That's usually what it takes. People send you to school to be educated. Then you try to educate them and they say, whoa, slow on. I got more life experience than you. I sent you to school to be smart. But now that you might be smarter than me, whoa. Let me fall back on something I'm comfortable with. And again, seek your own happiness, man. Because at the end of the day, the most likely the people who are judging you are people who are miserable and damn sure don't have the results to show their success. What their results are will lead to better outcomes. That's what I'm always going to leave you with, folks. When you are hearing people give you criticisms, ask them where are their outcomes to show their ways more successful. Where are their outcomes? How long have you been married? Show me your successful marriage then. Show me you've been done. Now again, don't show me how you've done this in success. Then show me where the community at large has done this in success. They're already putting out the numbers. 2053, zero wealth. Own your houses, whatever you think, zero wealth. Wealth is not attached to home ownership. Ding dong. Did you not know that? It's not. Everybody, again, we've been fooled to think that, I own a home. Oh, I got, no, that's not, your home doesn't get counted in actual net worth. It doesn't. People still check it off. What else do you own? I got my home. Yeah, I got it. Okay, cool. That doesn't get counted when you actually go to the white banks and ask for money of worth. Your home is not your net worth. It's not. It's never been counted. It's a liability, not an asset. I've heard people say that all the time. Most banks it's a mortgage, it's a liability. It's something that it's a debt you have to keep on paying. It's not an asset that can generate income. That's why you have something called rental properties. And again, man, I'm going to tell people out there, man, what you got to do is prioritize your happiness. Your happiness, what's intended for you to be happy in life may not be what you think it is. It may be someone who is not like you. I found that my wife compliments me. I have struggles, I have concerns, I have the same thing else as well. But what I like about my wife is that, again, we're different, but we work together in different ways. Our same broken history of seeing our families messed up over BS from both sides has made us say, you know what? We're going to get to the same point every marriage does, where you want to walk away. She's seen a guy down there that will probably blow her back out, right? Got hair, he looked good, younger, ain't got no gray in his beard. And I've seen a girl in a size 0 that she's not been in for 10 years. But again, the value we've been building is what will give us the longevity to continue on in the race, so long as we can keep each other happy and fulfilled. And sometimes we're not happy with each other, and it's that day. You got to get over the happy days. Have you been happy with your family every day? I'm sure my dad's not been happy with me a lot of days. I'm sure I've disappointed my father as a son with decisions I've made. You don't just get rid of your son for that. My dad's made bad decisions. I don't just get rid of him for that. Now, violating is a different story, but bad decisions, doing things I don't like, does not disqualify my father from me keeping him over the bad days from the good. It never does. I've had to try to educate him on that, is that, hey, violating is different. That'll put you outside the door. Doing something bad, not something I like it, we got to have a discussion. A discussion is needed. Change has to occur. But again, stop worrying about what the community wants you to be accepting of, and find your own damn path to being happy. Because some people are not going to come when the chips are down. I've got a friend right now going through the worst part of his life, and I've got to check on him to make sure. Hey, and I tell my wife all the time, you know what? If it was a woman, she'd be good. Everybody would be at her beck and call to see if she's okay. I'm there for my brother. He knows who he is. He's going through the worst. He's got to work 2 jobs. He's doing everything 1% income with a black woman, and he's still being told he ain't. And I'm there. I'm there for him. Because again, when it's a man going through stuff, I see my father go through the same thing, man. When my parents split up, father lost weight down to looked like a scarecrow. When I it was surprised when I saw him how much weight he lost. Sad. Not going to go into when my parents had an issue. They're back together now. My parents have reconciled and found a way through it. Proud of them. But for a middle part of that, it was rough, really rough. And I've seen my dad go through stuff and be left out on his own, alone. Neighbors turn on him. He's bad. He ain't this. I've seen me judge my father through them same lens. I've seen it looked at and say, Dad, it's your fault. Never looking at my father, what he was suffering through as a man. Again, I'm a child. I don't know anything about what men go through. I didn't see that he was unhappy, but what I did see and remember was him going to work every day, working doubles, calling me, hey, son, here's how you cook. Get on the phone, do this, season the chicken, rub the chicken, do this, put it in 355. Hell, I learned how to cook for my dad over the phone. I saw him at games every time the games was there. Hell, even in college, my parents were back together. My parents would drive 8 hours to see me run for 50, 60 seconds. They were there. They were together. My mom would film. My dad would yell from the stands, tell me, hey, son, you up. You didn't make a tackle, or you missed this one, or you false started. What the heck are you doing? And I'm like, please go. But I knew my father was there. But again, he was the villain in my neighborhood. He was bad because he was raising his sons to be successful. Now, all my friends I look at now, I don't see them successful in the same way. I don't, even as successful as my brother is. And what he did was he set us off on a path that was different from what all the pro-black community was doing in that area, where now the high school is a 1 on greatschools.org. You know, they give you 0 through 10. It's a 1 out of 10. 1 out of 10. I could own 40 homes in that area because the homes ain't worth nothing. The value of the neighborhood did not go up. It was that way before people went in and kind of, again, they brought the value got brought down. There's something wrong in the community where we don't create and build wealth. We talk about it, but we don't build it. And they've already projected that by 2053, the black community on a whole will have 0 wealth. Economic Institute of Poverty and Wealth. Look it up. I've been putting it everywhere. I got a short video on my channel that it talks about by 2053, the black community as a whole. I ain't talking about LeBron James. I'm not talking about Michael B. Jordan. They gonna be all right because they're in a different class. But for the rest of us black we are all gonna have 0 wealth. And again, what am I doing about it? Ancestrylands. You can go buy property. Own land. Well, you know, it's in California. That's the problem. The small thinking, small hat thinking. We don't think beyond our neighborhoods, beyond our state. But we know Warren Buffett, who people like to quote all the time, man, has properties all over. Probably hasn't seen most of the properties. Grant Cardone, properties everywhere, all over the world. And you could own a property in another state and can't wrap your head around the fact that you don't live there. But we want to talk about queens and kings and this. We're kings, but I'm sorry, kings and queens own land. That's the kicker. They're the kings and queens of land. Again, we got the talking points, but we don't have the action behind it. We got all they follow our community. Yeah, they follow from us what is cool to be able to take and is profitable, but we're not building nations because we don't own anything. I've got a business. Okay, great. What's your EIN number? Do you have a business banking account? I accept payments. Okay, good. Do you have a DUNS number? What's that? I'm sorry. Do you have a business line of credit? See, the answer, once you start going deeper, you don't get any more yeses. Are you building it? Do you employ your children? Are you having a legacy business? None of that's being done. None. And again, 2053. That is actually 30 years from now. I'll be just cruising into 72, right at the end of my life, to see the fall of the community. And again, what we have is everyone defending a white woman at the top of the male manosphere. And again, the men's group is being led by a white woman here, and people are defending her because she looks at us as less thans. Comments are saying that with a known, I guess, person that is a defender of the white race. And that's fine for him to feel that way. But again, and what do? They divide and conquer, split it up. People defending it and all, she shouldn't have to apologize. Okay, great. But when Kanye said what he said, the black community threw him away. And he was right about what he said, correct? But again, that community stayed on code. They pushed Kanye out. He got out of everything, lose everything, even convinced his own woman to leave him. Oh, I got him out of that. Everybody caved in on him. But again, like I said, folks, find your own happiness, man. I'm not going to tell you anything. You don't want to donate to the show, go yourself. I don't care, man. You don't need to do anything, man. Keep your money, buy Jordans. I don't know. Buy more gold chains. That's what you should do. Buy gold chains, buy gold Jordans. Do whatever you want to do, man. I'm going to keep putting out the information for those that want to listen. Find your own happiness. Ancestrylands, I'm out.